You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
Few subjects send a chill down the spine like historic mental asylums. Why do these places haunt our collective nightmares? It's not just the crumbling walls or flickering lights, it's what went on behind those doors. For centuries, asylums were where society banished its most vulnerable, often treating them as less than human. The technical term here is institutionalization, locking people away out of sight, out of mind. But let me ask, did these institutions protect society or hide its shame? The answer, as we'll see, is as disturbing as any horror film. Now, you might be thinking, surely they were trying to help. Sadly, compassion was often in short supply. Imagine being chained in a cold stone room, the iron manacleone technical term biting into your skin for days, weeks, even years. Let's dig deeper. What was daily life like in these places, and how did the world's understanding of mental illness shape their design? Throughout this episode, I'll guide you through the shadows and shine a light on the realities that shaped and continue to shape her fears of the asylum. Ready to confront some uncomfortable truths? Let's step inside the asylum's iron gates together. Let's wind the clock all the way back. In ancient times, mental illness was seen as a supernatural cursed demonic possession, divine punishment, or even witchcraft. Instead of science, societies used ritual and magic to help the afflicted. One common treatment was exorcism, imagine chanting priests swinging incense, hoping to drive out evil spirits. Another was trepanation, drilling a hole in the skull to let the badness escape. Now, you might be horrified by this, but remember, without modern neuroscience, people did their best with what they knew. The technical term here is humoral theory, the belief that health was ruled by 4 body fluids or humors. Imbalance? Time for bloodletting, or purging, fancy words for draining blood or forcing vomiting. Imagine a desperate parent in ancient Greece watching a healer cut their child to bleed away melancholy. Barbaric or just tragic misunderstanding? Even so, these early treatments set the stage for centuries of confusion between medicine and mysticism. So, when did science finally start to take the driver's seat? Let's move forward. As the centuries rolled on, the Middle Ages brought a chilling regression. The technical terms here are demonology and ostracism. Mental illness was demonized literally. Those afflicted weren't just shunned, they were often labeled as witches or heretics. Let me tell you a story. In medieval towns, mentally ill people were sometimes paraded through the streets, mocked or punished, all in the name of expelling evil. Exorcisms ramped up, as did public executions. Can you imagine suffering from schizophrenia and being accused of sorcery? Now you might ask, was there nowhere safe? In rare cases, monasteries offered shelter, but with little understanding or resources, treatment was still harsh. The key takeaway? Fear and ignorance transformed mental illness from a medical issue to a moral failing, and that stigma lingers even now. But in the heart of London, a new chapter was about to begin, a chapter called Bedlam. Let's step into Bedlam officially. Bethlehem Royal Hospital, founded in 1247, and the very word Bedlam now means chaos. Why? This institution, one of the world's oldest psychiatric hospitals, became a byword for horror and disorder. Patients were left chained in filthy cells, sometimes for years, and here's the technical bit subjected to public viewing. That's right. Wealthy Londoners paid to gawk at the mad as if it were a human zoo. You might wonder, did no one protest? In fact, for centuries, this was seen as entertainment. Some even believed the spectacle was therapeutic, a twisted misunderstanding of exposure therapy. One of the most bizarre treatments was the spinning chair patients were strapped in and rotated at dizzying speeds to shake out madness. It's hard to say where science ended and cruelty began. Bedlam's legacy? A symbol of everything that could go wrong when society locks away its problems and calls it progress. The Renaissance brought renewed curiosity about the mind, but real care for the mentally ill lagged behind. This was the era of the Madhouse, a technical term for early asylums, often little more than holding pens. Still, the idea was shifting. Maybe, just maybe, the mentally ill deserved a space away from chaos. Were these asylums a step forward? In theory, yes. In practice, overcrowding, filth, and neglect ruled the day. One story from Paris describes patients chained to walls, barely fed, and rarely cleaned hardly the sanctuary promised by their founders. You might be thinking, wasn't anyone trying to help? Absolutely. Some reformers believed in moral treatment, the idea that calm surroundings could heal troubled minds, but these were rare exceptions, not the rule. Here's a technical analogy. Imagine a computer with a broken motherboard. No amount of polishing the screen will fix it, but that's how many asylums approached care, focusing on outward order, ignoring inner suffering. Still, the seeds of reform were planted, even as darkness continued to grow inside asylum walls. The 19th century's Industrial Revolution changed everything, and not always for the best. As cities swelled, so did the number of people labeled insane. The technical term here, institutional overpopulation. Facilities built for a few hundred found themselves crammed with thousands. Let me paint a picture. Tiny, unventilated wards, people sleeping 5 to a bed, disease spreading like wildfire. Staff shortages meant neglect was rampant. The word custodial care, which should mean protection, became an excuse for cruelty. Now you might ask, was this just bad management? Not exactly. Society still didn't understand conditions like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. The only tools were confinement and restraint straitjackets, chains, even cages. One haunting fact: studies show descendants of those who lived in industrial-era cities still have higher rates of anxiety and depression. Trauma echoes across generations. The lesson? When society treats mental illness as a problem to hide, the suffering multiplies for patients, families, and the generations that follow. Let's talk about some of the most disturbing treatments in asylum history. 2 technical terms to remember: rotation therapy and hydrotherapy. Rotation therapy involves spinning patients in chairs until they vomited, thinking dizziness would reset the mind. Hydrotherapy meant ice baths or high-pressure water jets, aiming to shock patients back to sanity. Can you picture it? Cold water, metal restraints, and the constant terror of what would come next. The line between procedure and punishment was razor thin. Now, you might wonder, did anyone improve? Sometimes, but more often, these treatments traumatized rather than healed. No informed consent, no real evidence, just desperate measures. Here's an analogy. Imagine fixing a jammed printer by hitting it with a hammer. Sometimes it works, usually it breaks, and it's never the right solution. It's a stark reminder. When knowledge is lacking, cruelty often fills the void. By the 20th century, mental institutions became testing grounds for radical treatments. Ever heard of a lobotomy? That's a surgical procedure severing connections in the prefrontal cortex intended to calm, but often leaving patients emotionally blunted or worse. Another term, electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. Early on, ECT was given without anesthesia, leading to broken bones and memory loss. Let me tell you about Walter Freeman, the so-called ice pick doctor. He popularized lobotomies by sliding a sharp rod behind the eye socket, a procedure that could be done in minutes, but cost countless lives their futures. Now, you might be thinking, was there no oversight? Not really. Asylums were often closed worlds, immune to scrutiny. In this era, patients became test subjects for new psychotropic drugs, like the first antipsychotics. While some breakthroughs emerged, many suffered severe side effects starve dyskinesia, for instance, causing uncontrollable movements. The lesson: unchecked power in medicine can be as dangerous as ignorance. Eventually, public outcry forced a reckoning. The mid-20th century saw a tidal wave of change. Investigative journalism and whistleblowers exposed the horrors inside mental hospitals. Books like The Shame of the States and movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest made the public sit up and ask, how did we let this happen? The technical term here is deinstitutionalization, the process of closing large asylums and moving patients into community care. Laws like the Community Mental Health Act of 1963 aim to create outpatient clinics and support networks. Now you might think, problem solved. But here's the conflict. While many found freedom, others were left with nowhere to go. Underfunded programs led to homelessness and jail time for the mentally ill. Let me tell you a story. A patient released from an institution, given a bus ticket and little else. Freedom, yes, but also abandonment. The lesson? Reform is vital, but execution matters. Without resources, the cycle of neglect continues. So, what remains of the asylum era? While many infamous buildings have been demolished or repurposed, Their ghosts linger in our language, our fears, and our policies. The technical terms stigma and systemic failure haunt our mental health systems. You might wonder, have we really learned from the past? Today, some progress is real. Advances in psychopharmacology like SSRIs, which balance brain chemistry, and new therapies offer hope. But underfunded services and social stigma still leave many without help. Imagine walking through a modern city, seeing homelessness and untreated illness. The shadows of the asylum stretch long. Let's not sugarcoat it. We didn't get it right then, and we're still struggling now. But by facing these uncomfortable truths, we can build a more humane, compassionate future for all. Thanks for journeying with me through the haunted halls of mental health history. Remember, understanding is the first step toward change.